where we put you on the map. This is Ron Costa broadcasting live in the Mappable USA studios in Las Vegas, Nevada. And folks, everybody knows timing is everything. So today we're going to talk about some timing issues and what coronavirus is doing with respect to opportunity zones and a few other things. And speaking of opportunity zones, let's bring in Vicki Hutchmala from the QOZ Marketplace and the Opportunity Zones Authority. Vicki, how are you today?
I'm outstanding, Ron. It's absolutely gorgeous today in Vegas. Although there's no gambling going on, the day is absolutely perfect. And again, we have one of our favorite guests on, and we're going to talk about the impact of the coronavirus on opportunity zones and real estate, and can't wait.
Sounds good. So let's bring him on. A big friend of the show, and we're a friend of his as well. Folks, let's introduce Blake Christian. Blake, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Ron. Thank you for having me. Hello, Vicki. Always good to
Great.
talk to you.
And as people know who have listened to podcasts before, you're a partner over at HCVT, and you guys are always busy with all the stuff that you're doing, and you're just really kicking it in with opportunity zones and everything else that's happening these days, huh?
Yep, COVID hasn't slowed down the Oz niche. It's still going strong.
Yeah, and whenever I go and research articles online, or I see some information, invariably something that you create or your articles, or they always pop up somehow. So you're churning out the content, and for some reason you're an expert in SEO because I'm always seeing your stuff.
It does get out there. Well, thanks for reading it. I'm glad somebody is.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get into the whole thing about this whole opportunity zones, and obviously, this whole coronavirus has canceled everything. It's canceled basically everything that we know, and it's also caused a number of delays in terms of the official timing. A lot of, like, for example, the IRS, they moved the April 15th date, but it's also affected date times and timelines and opportunity zones. So why don't we go over a few things that you've seen with respect to the timing issues on that, and maybe some of the proposed changes and the technical corrections and things like that.
Yeah, so we, obviously with the national, emergency with COVID, the IRS came out with some guidance in April that basically allows Oz investors an extra period of time. So if your 180-day investment period to roll your capital gain into a qualified opportunity fund, which I'll refer to as a QOF during the discussion. So that 180-day period, if it falls between April 1st and July 14th, for example, you have until July 15th to do the actual funding. So if you had a gain that you held individually, it wasn't coming through on a K1, and sometime in the first couple of weeks of September, then that would have fallen into early April, and now you have until July 15th to fund your QOF. Now on top of that, so that does, and that also gives people that would have had a K1 gain from 2019 or a 1231 gain in 2019, that will flow. That would normally have to be reinvested by September 10th, is where those 180 days would fall, if you elected the final regulations, which gave you more time, and so that will that is another option to get a further extension on your QOF funding date.
Okay, and people who invest in these funds and people who are doing this kind of stuff, do they have any idea about these timelines to begin with, or do they come to you knowing this kind of stuff and saying, okay, well, what's the new timeline, or do they just have no clue whatsoever that there is a timeline involved?
It's about 50-50. 50% of the calls are, hey, I know I have until June 27th to do this, and then I always have you always have to ask them a lot of questions, because somebody may have just held Amazon stock and sold it in July of 2019, and it's not coming through on a K1. Well, their 180 days is up. They don't have time to reinvest that. So half of them come in knowing, usually they know like some June, they'll throw out June 30th, which isn't quite right. It's the 27th, and so we have to dig into the facts, make sure that they know that, and then the other half are, hey, I just sold this, and what do I do? The other huge, probably the most common error that people have, and I've probably had this call, 10 times in the last 2 weeks, is they'll be in a little bit of a panic, and they'll say, hey, because of COVID, I was going to make an investment into a piece of land or a building or something, and that's got put off, and I know I only have 180 days to do that. Well, the 180 days is just to get the money into the QOF, and that defers your gain. And once it's in there, you have another 6 months before you have to do anything, and then you have to drop it down. But this program is perfect for the facts we're in right now. You've got massive uncertainty. You have half the country in lockdown. Business is slowed, and so what does that do? It makes everybody freeze in their decision making. Well, as long as you get your money into the QOF and you can put it into your own QOF and just park it there for a while, and now you got, as we'll get into, you can have as long as 5-7 years to really decide what you're going to do with this. And there's no other tax provision out there. You do a 1031, you got 180 days to really reinvest the money. This program is just incredible for timing and somebody that just needs a little bit of breathing room to make decisions.
Do you think that the impact of the virus on opportunity zones will also impact new legislation regarding the expansion of the program?
Well, I've had several discussions with congressmen and some state representatives, and I've done throughout my career, I've done a lot of economic development work, and I've been volunteer chamber chair and things. So I've been involved in a lot of just business development type things, and I actually think that there's no other tax program that's already on the books that's better suited for COVID recovery. And here's why. The Opportunity Zone program is nationwide. It touches over 8,700 census tracts. Most of those census tracts, virtually all of them, are, touch economically challenged areas even before COVID. The COVID emergency is going to really negatively impact, it already is, the hospitality industry. And a lot of those people live in these, there's a huge overlap. I haven't seen all of the unemployment claims by census tract, but I can almost guarantee you when you overlay those, there's going to be a lot of commonality. And so my proposal is to increase the census tracts by 20%. Let every state increase their census tract count by 20%, and they have to pick from the highest, those census tracts that increased unemployment the highest. So they in descending order. Pick those, and then they should also give priority to pick census tracts that are adjacent to legacy census tracts that were picked in 2018, and so you get some synergies there, and then then you can layer in maybe a payroll tax exemption for anybody that's hired that lives in the zone. You could, and then some investment tax credits that they could layer in. Those could be federal and state. But anyway, there's already, it's just such a great foundation, I think, for a program that could really accelerate our recovery out of this hole that's been dug.
Well, the thing about that, though, too, is, Blake, is that these funds still need input into the funds. People still have to invest in these funds. Do you think that the whole coronavirus situation right now is giving investors kind of like a weary feeling about even moving forward with this stuff just to begin with? Are they waiting to see how all this plan, kind of like works out in the short term, I guess? But do you see this whole thing about investors afraid of pulling the trigger on this kind of situation?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think it actually gives them, and this is, the conversations I've had is, there's uncertainty, but also their alternative is I'm going to do nothing and then just pay a bunch of tax on my 2019 gain. And when they look at the alternative and say, I can roll it into this fund, keep the taxes that I was otherwise going to pay, and use that for other business things that I have. And once it's sitting, if it's your own QOF and Qualified Opportunity Zone business, the subsidiary entity, while you're making a decision on a real estate project or a business that you might start, while the money's dormant in there, you can make loans to related parties. You can, you'd have to document it as a valid loan, pay interest on it and things. Mm-hmm. It's not as if you don't have access to that cash in the interim, and you can still pass the semi-annual test. So you're right, Ron. What happened at for the first month, everybody was frozen in fear and indecision and things. But the conversations I've had over the last month is, and you walk them through the flexibility of the program and things, is they say, geez, I'd rather just park the money there. I'll decide what I'm going to do by year end. And once you set it up, if you decide at year end that you don't want to do it, or in January of next year, you pull the money. There's no penalties. You pick up the tax that you would have otherwise paid. If you pull it out in 2021, you've deferred the tax for another year anyway. So it's
and you haven't lost anything.
No, there's no penalties, no charges, there's some documentation, there's some hoops to jump through, but it's not very costly to set up your own QOF. I will tell you, I've seen certainly a lot of real estate projects have stalled, but that doesn't mean everybody's pulling their money out of their QOF and triggering the gain. They're just saying, okay, we may not move forward on that project for a little bit because it was a hotel, and the hotel industry is going to be decimated for a few years. But I've got a project, two hotels in the Bay Area in California right now, and they're hard charging forward on them.
Yeah, well, luckily for us that live in Vegas, we don't have any hotels here.
No, we don't have to worry about that.
But
I hear you're opening up soon.
Yeah, we'll see what happens the next couple of days. Yeah, but you made a good point before the podcast started, Blake, about how even though the last couple of months, 2.5 months or so, we've seen so many losses in the stock market, that a lot of people are still, even if they sold, they're still looking at capital gains. So that is really a plus for the opportunity zones industry in general, because it all relies on capital gains.
Right. Yeah, we've had such a run up in the market over the last 2 or 3 years. And so if you've been sitting on investments for that period of time, even though you might have taken a 20-25% hit in March, even if you thinned out your equity exposure, when you sold those, you're probably still in the black. You lost some of your appreciation, but you didn't lose all of it. And so my clients that have liquidated parts of their portfolio still are sitting there with a net gain. And remember, you can pick and choose. I mean, you could have had $200,000 of gains and $199,000 of losses. You can cherry pick and just pick the gains, and you'd still have $200,000 of capital gain to carry into an Oz fund.
Well, and once the people, the fear factor and all of the aspects of this virus kind of settle down and people start to go back into a relatively normal situation, then things are going to rise up again, and investors will generate more capital gains by the end of the year, which they can then put into whatever inactive opportunity zone they created during this time. So it's kind of a win-win.
You know, that's a great point, Vicki, is that you know, and that's the conversations I'm having too, is, you know, appreciation is the whole game plan on an Oz fund, because that's ultimately going to be tax-free, right, after 10 years. And so if you can now buy stuff, real estate, active businesses, etc., a lot cheaper than you could back in February before all this happened, you know, now that's going to be just adding to the, you know, your tax-free ROI in year 10. And so, you know, first of all, you know, this is making, I think the COVID situation is making people have more of a long-term investment horizon. They're pretty spooked by the equity markets. They're spooked by the bond markets right now. They're thinking there's going to be a lot of bankruptcies. But that's opportunity to buy stuff less expensively. And
exactly.
that is the whole driver of the Oz program, is tucking, you know, huge capital, you know, future appreciation in a tax-free product. So it's a great time to do that.
Right. And I really believe that the things are going to spring back a little bit faster than most people are anticipating. I don't think it's going to be this this period of things going down and doom and gloom and that. I don't think that's going to last very much longer. And I think that by the fall time, things will be bustling again, because people who create business and people who have money are creative and innovative, and that innovation and creativity will pop in again. And so things may not be the same as they were, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be better as a result, because people will think about it a little bit harder and they'll understand a little bit more, and things will bounce back, just because that's human nature.
Exactly. And, you know, just one case in point, you know, there's no doubt that we're going to be onshoring a lot of foreign manufacturing that's going on from U.S. companies. It's not all going to be onshored, but people, you know, I mean, we've found out through this process, you know, we need some diversification, and, you know, bad things can happen anywhere in the world. And so if you have a large manufacturing operation, it should be, you know, geographically dispersed. So, you know, I'm going to be one of those guys that is owning, you know, manufacturing space, warehouse space.
Absolutely.
You know, we're going to have a whole lot of regional distribution centers. So again, over the next 3 to 7 years, you know, we're going to see, I think, a huge, you know, boom in you know, commercial building as a result of that, and that's, you know, getting more opportunities for the Opportunity Zone program, for sure.
Yeah, and, you know, people fear that word bankruptcy, and all these companies are going to go into bankruptcy and that. bankruptcy was created to help business bankruptcies were created to help businesses to remodel themselves and recreate themselves and say, oh, well, I had this bad situation and now I'm going to jump out of it and I'm going to make it better. And bankruptcy gives you that opportunity so you don't have to close down and go out of business. You can just recreate yourself.
Right. Yeah. Restructuring is the key, and we've had many highly successful business people have been through a bankruptcy or two before they Walt Disney. Not everybody knows that filed bankruptcy, and
right, and that's not a bad thing.
No, you want them to survive, these innovators.
Well, yeah, and let's get back to the 1031 you mentioned before, Blake. Last time we had you on the podcast, you were talking about a lot of people who have broken 1031s, kind of like use the Opportunity Zone Fund as kind of like a fallback situation. So, do you think that that's going to happen again, like as far as more 1031s broken, or do you think that the difference in the time differences will allow a lot of people to save their 1031 if it's not broken by a timeline right now? Oh no,
I guarantee you, one of my partners had a busted 1031 for one of his clients that was supposed to close at the end of March, and similar to, or exactly the same as the Oz extension that I mentioned that was extended via an IRS notice in April. That critical deadline is if your closing leg of a 1031 fell within April 1st to July 15th, then you would have till July 15th to close that second leg. Now, there was a 2018, I recall, revenue procedure that talked about a kind of a much broader extension for 1031s, and there's still some debate and interpretation on whether that RevProc would get triggered as a result of the national emergency order, and so we're still waiting on a little bit more guidance, but there may be an extension beyond July 15th in a 1031 context, but we're still waiting to hear some more guidance on that.
But that COVID must be really serious if the IRS is willing to extend anything on the 1031, because they've been so like, we're not moving anything for you. If you bust your thing by a day, that's it, it's done. Yeah. And now with the extensions, I would ever see like an extension for a 1031. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I have to really compliment Treasury, the IRS, and the SBA. They have how quickly they've reacted to this. Certainly, we've heard some horror stories on the SBA side, but you have to understand, they've made more loans in the course of 45 days than they, it's 10-15 times more loans than dollar amount than they made in all of 2019, and so, these poor bankers, were thrown into this, but it's really phenomenal, and the IRS guidance too. I mean, it's really, really quite amazing how many rulings they've pushed out there, a heck of a lot of guidance. It hasn't been, perfectly clear every step, but they have been working hard. It's been impressive.
And that's a true fact. And I think that has a lot to do with leadership and who's directing and what kind of ideas come up, and being able to act and not just sit and think about it for 6 months and then decide you don't know what to decide to do. That's the difference between government as normal and government in an emergency with a leader who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, and the IRS commissioner happens to be from Los Angeles, very successful tax attorney there, great guy, totally committed to the job. Our firm knows him very well, and he's doing a fantastic job.
Yeah. Well, do you think that if you have a 1031 that's broken, and even if you have an extension to July 15th or later, whatever it might end up being, do you think that there's more possibilities, more properties, rather, that are out there available to go into, or less?
Oh, I think there's a lot more. It just takes a little more time to close things, again, disruption, slows things down. And
right, it's systemic. Yeah.
And so, but yes, I love your question, and it's something I talk about a lot. Is if now I do have to qualify this. There are 4 states, including California, which is a huge one to deal with. California doesn't recognize the Opportunity Zone program. They
right.
do now. They have 879 census tracts. You can invest there. You can defer your federal gain, but it does you no good from a California tax perspective. So if you can't close, so I always tell my California clients, do a 1031 first before you think about doing an Oz transaction. But if you find yourself in a broken 1031 where you're already going to trigger the gain anyway, in 99% of the cases, you can save it with because you're still within the time frame for reinvesting under the Oz program. Roll your money in, and remember, you only have to put the gain in there so you can walk with your tax basis from the transaction. So that's not all bad. You don't have to put 100% of the dollars into the new real estate project, and you can leverage it. So I'm a big fan of using the Oz program if you're in any state other than California, Mississippi, North Carolina, or Massachusetts. So Massachusetts only recognizes the program for corporations but not individuals, which is really odd. But
yeah, that's weird. Do you think the virus will have an impact on those 4 states to basically see the light and change their policy regarding Opportunity Zones, or not so much?
I don't know. I've spent a fair amount of time in Sacramento trying to talk them into it. There's still some push, but not a whole lot of receptivity to changing the program. What I've proposed to them, and the other part of it is you have a 13.3% capital gain rate in California. It's the same as the ordinary income after you hit $1 million of taxable income, and most of our clients are in that position. So what I've proposed there is, okay, why don't you let people invest? Let's do no step ups at the 5 and 7 year mark, but at the 10-year mark, why don't we have they can pick, either exempt 50% of the gain from tax or impose a 5 or 6% tax, which would be a tax rate that you would deal with in most other states. And then I think they can be a lot more competitive, and they're not really giving up that much. But if you look at the California budget, a heck of a lot of their budget is tied to capital gain income, and Silicon Valley's, the reason for that.
Right. So have you found that there's more people creating Opportunity Zones now because of this virus, or just those few people willing to take that risk?
No, I'm probably setting up on average of 3 or 4 a month. Last year we set up about 35, and so we're definitely outpacing last year. Now part of that is because now we have the final regs, Those didn't come till December of last year, and so there's not many doubts about how the program works. But we're definitely going to outpace last year on formation of opportunity zone funds for sure.
Right. Well, and
so
there's
impressive.
just more people with more education about them too.
Yeah, and it's I have a lot of phone calls where people just say, look, I've heard a little bit about this, and I'd say 80% of the time by the end of the call, their summation is, well, now talk me out about why wouldn't I do this? Maybe it's more like 90%. So the program sells itself. If they, I'm an advocate, but if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. But they come to the conclusion on their own. It's like, why wouldn't I do this? What am I missing?
Exactly. Well, that's just because it's more pros than cons.
Yeah.
And you must be a really good talker, Blake.
Well, it's funny. These calls go the longest for sure. Probably my average client phone call is 20 minutes, half hour. But the first call on these is always I won't take a half hour call on a new Oz client. I have to have an hour because they have so many questions and there's just so much to cover.
Do you think you're more effective when you're in the office or more effective at home with sweatpants?
Probably I still, even when I'm in the office, probably 80% of my business is over the phone. And I will tell you, the biggest sea change in my style and everything is the Zoom meetings. And I don't just use them, now I use them pretty much. I was actually thinking of doing this one as a Zoom. But it's really a function of being able to see the people interacting. And I will tell you, I'm convinced, and I'm using me as an example, is if it's a conference call with a bunch of people on it, I pay so much more attention on a Zoom call than I do. I find myself multitasking a lot less because of the visual aspects. And the other thing,
that's a good point. Yep.
The other thing, I'm not great at remembering people's names, and I love it because it'll be people that I've dealt with for years, and then it's like, okay, that's the face. Oh, and I can match up names and faces a lot better with the Zoom format. It's a real game changer, and I think everybody's pretty excited about it.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
You'll do more Zoom calls even after you go back to the office regularly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
Hey, Blake, I want to before I close this out, I do want to ask you one more question. The government created that CARES Act for stimulus money, and the whole payroll protection program, the PPP, and a lot of other sub programs to get to provide some help for people who are struggling. But a lot of times right now we're seeing a lot of the banks not be able to fill that need, and people aren't getting their checks. And could the Opportunity Zone program kind of fill this void somehow, or get involved in this somehow, where it would make sense?
Well, you could during the period where, especially if you're doing a real estate project, if it's a large real estate project, it may take you 3 to 4 years to get all your entitlements in place to do the project. And while that money's sitting there, you could, now granted you're taking some risks, but you could loan that money on a secured basis to businesses, and put the money to work. I actually have a call set tomorrow with an East Coast group that's kind of an incubator using the Oz program, and we'll definitely be talking about that. I'm working with a couple of counties in California, and we're looking at setting up. And actually, I'm on the board of an incubator in Long Beach, and so there's a whole bunch of ways that we are using the Oz Fund platform as as a tool to make investments into small businesses, and working with some cities and counties to create jobs and hopefully save some businesses. But obviously you're taking on a little more risk that way, but there's also some pretty good returns on it.
Well, do you think it would have to be a business within the opportunity zone that you're working with, or if you have an opportunity zone that you've invested in Vegas, could you invest in a business in an opportunity zone in Phoenix?
Yeah, you can. You don't have to be just focused on the census tracts where your fund is. You can invest all over the place.
Yeah, and like we said throughout this entire podcast, you have to know the timelines for this too, and you have to know the dates. You have to know what the extensions are. You have to know all these new things that are really tough for the regular person to keep track of, I would imagine. Let's do a really quick shameless plug for HCVT. Blake, how does anybody do this for themselves? I mean, they doesn't everyone just pretty much have to go to someone like yourself or a lawyer? Because how could they know this?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to know, but I'm as you said, I write on this a lot. There's a lot on our website. You can self-educate, but and if it's not me, just seek out somebody that does this a lot. Just to say, okay, I've done my own reading, I've educated myself, but I need a gut check. Am I right on this, that, and the other? Because it is, it's really easy to make some mistakes. And I'm not trying to make it all mysterious, but there's definitely some elements of complexity.
No doubt.
And you did mention I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, absolutely. There's a lot of complexity to it, even if it sounds easy. No matter what it sounds like, when you get down to it, it's very complex, and that's why people absolutely need to talk to you, Blake, because you make the complexities clearer.
Well, thank you. But there's obviously a lot of content on your website. Our website is HCVT.com. You can get it off of Ron and Vicky's sites, but and then if you go to we have an Opportunity Zone landing page, and there's just a ton of articles in there that go from the basic to the more complex, and so somebody that that is willing to read, you can learn 80% of it on there, and then narrow down your questions, and just seek out somebody that has worked in the area a lot.
Yeah, and we'll link that in the show notes for sure, so people can just click on a thing, go right to it. But I also want to stress that we're not talking about like small-time investors. We're talking about investors of all sizes, people who may come to you with maybe even family offices who are used to dealing in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and even they don't know these timelines, and even they need the guidance. So it works from every single level in terms of getting educated. And if you don't, then you're faced with a lot of problems should something go wrong. And I'm sure, Blake, people contact you for that too after it's all been a problem.
Yeah, fix the messes because they thought they could do it themselves, and then they found out they couldn't. And now it's going to cost them a lot more money to fix it than if they'd just gone to you in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah, about 25% of my work is salvaging, poorly executed Opportunity Zone funds.
Yeah,
I
right.
would have thought it was even more than that.
And we got the website down. Blake, is there another way people can contact you, email, or phone, or should they just go to the website?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm going to give you my cell phone just because we're in the. It'll still be a couple of weeks before I think I get back in the office. So that's
okay.
562-305-8050.
All right, got it. Yeah, and everybody out there listening, if you have any questions on these opportunity zones and the timing, the new timings, all the new guidelines, definitely contact Blake, give him a call, go to the website, whatever it is. Vicki, what do you think? What do you think about this?
I think that this is very important information, and I would stress to every single person listening and every friend of every person listening that if you are interested in opportunity zones, if you have one, if you want to set one up, if you want to figure out what it is, you owe it to yourself absolutely to contact Blake, because of all the people we talk to about opportunity zones, Blake is one of the most expert professional persons that can help you undeniably.
Yeah, no question. I agree wholeheartedly.
Thank you so much. I really value our friendship and all the good work that you guys are doing, also educating your audience. So thank you for letting me be a small part of it.
No, it's fun. It's great. And you know what? These days people could just drive to your house, Blake. You'll probably be home. You're self-quarantined.
Yeah.
I could see you in sweatpants.
Oh man.
They have to stay.
That's right. We live in crazy times for sure. No question. But Blake, thanks again for being a guest on today's podcast. It was really interesting, really informative, and really it was the information that's needed. Not a lot of people know this. They're even out there with these deadlines. So you brought a lot of good information to the podcast today, and I thank you for that.
Well, thanks again for the opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and Vicki, thanks for co-hosting. Folks out there, you're listening to the Mappable USA podcast at mappableusa.com. Go to that website. You can scroll down the homepage. You'll see all our syndication sources. You click the one that you like best so you never miss another episode. Or if you want to be a guest on the show, like Blake was today, there's a guest tab there on the site. Just click on that, fill out the form. We'll see what we can do about getting you on the show. So until then, thanks everyone for all your support. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for listening. And we'll be at you next week with another Mappable USA podcast. Have a great week, everyone.